ground rules. In order to have your questions and comments appear on the recorded version of this, we're going to have these mics. I'm using this one. This one is for anybody in the audience who wants to say something, ask something. Can you guys come on up? We can get a little closer. It's just easier that way. I know that we've got a lot of stuff going on in Cleveland Heights right now. I know that we've had a lot of talk about charter changes recently because that's out there right now. I know that there are some people who are interested in having a lot of conversation about those charter changes, and I am happy to participate in that conversation as well. But if there are other things that people want to talk about tonight, I am open. Ask me anything. If there's something that for some reason I cannot or will not answer, I'll just be upfront about that too. Okay, I'm just gonna take this, and I'm gonna sit here so that I can refer to a variety of documents and things like that on this computer. So,
Mr. Dew, you're running for council. If I were to organize a debate for the candidates, would you be interested? Sure. Okay. Great.
All right. We're making connections here. Okay.
I've got people asking about swimming at the high school. Season ends Monday. My understanding is the high school is ready to welcome us back like we did in early June. What's the status of that?
Okay, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can find something really quick for you. I know that we've had this conversation before, and I know where you stand on it. I will recap my perception of your position on this, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, the last time we talked about this, I was pretty clear about my position, which is I don't believe that the city should. And this is normative. This is a normative question. It's my value judgment. I don't believe that the city should be inserted into the relationship between the school district and the people that they promised access to this newly constructed pool if it is not necessary. If it is necessary, then I think the city should be involved in it. But not if it's not necessary. And the information that I've been given is that it is not only not necessary, but also more problematic for the city to introduce that complexity than it would be if the school district just did it themselves. The school district can. They are legally allowed to. They certainly have the financial wherewithal to do it. They have not neglected their infrastructure, staffing, for decades in the same way that the city has. We're playing a lot of catch up. We've got a lot of work to do to get back to zero before we can start, moving forward and progressing. So I believe that it is a good thing for the school district to make their pool available, the pool that they own, that they have the license for, to make their pool available to the residents of Cleveland Heights and University Heights, all on their own. Hire some lifeguards. Could be students, If you wanted to experiment with it first, maybe just make it available to students for recreation purposes, after hours or, something like that, before making it available to all of the residents. So that's my position. And if I remember correctly, in that conversation, you said, okay, yeah, well, maybe, but maybe you should do it anyway. Be the hero.
I think I said take the win. Take the win. Take the win. Right. On behalf of residents, because it seemed like we had the district being intractable. You didn't really apply any motive to Liz Kirby's position.
Well, I don't know.
Again, so I know Liz Kirby as a someone who wouldn't just shut the citizens out, that they want this to happen. They're asking for some connective tissue here and some partnership on the city's behalf in this case. And council legislated the money, and you could have vetoed it, and you did not.
Okay, so legislating and sort of providing an appropriation, $25,000. What I considered doing was writing a check to the school district like, hey, this is our contribution to your program. We're going to donate this money to the school district. I doubt they need our $25,000 for those purposes. I think in the conversation with the school district, the impression that I got from them is that they are not interested in managing a program.
I mean, I think you could have written a check to Dan Budin and Tiger Sharks, and I think he would have managed it.
Well, I don't know why we would have to do that, but I mean, I suppose we could.
Just to pay for the lifeguards, you can still sell the passes. Again, this is about the school district managing a resident access program. They just decided they didn't want to do it at this point. But again, maybe you do it again just to improve the relationship, which is damaged. It's been damaged your entire tenure. So that was my point from the start was this is just a first step on building back some trust between these two organizations that should work together on the citizens' behalf.
And so, from my perspective, you think that it's a good thing for the city to say, we don't have to. This adds burden to our goals and duties here. No, wait.
I think the burden is negligible, but sure, there is a minuscule burden.
If you say so.
You're saying it's bigger? You're saying it's a big burden?
Well, what I think is this, based on the information that I've received from staff here in this building, and their experience of working with the school district, managing a community access program for them, I don't think that it has been negligible based on their recounting of their experience. Now, I don't have a personal dog in this fight. I really, when this was brought up in 2022, I know that this is a very niche concern, but I do want to get into it. When this was, but all concerns are important, and I think that we should have the discourse about it. But when this was brought to my attention in 2022, the reason why it was elevated to my attention at all really was because the school district had closed the pool for COVID. There was no indication in 2021 that they would be reopening it. And so the administration in 2021 did not budget for those positions in Parks and Rec for 2022. And so when the school came back to the city, came back to Joe McCray and said, hey, we want to do this again, Joe McCray said, well, we can't. We didn't budget for that. And like I've said in previous discussions about this, wait, just a second. Like I've said in previous discussions about this, that gave sort of a pause moment where, as a new mayor, I started asking a question. And the question was, wait, why is the city doing that? It's not our facility. Why? Like they take money for tickets to games. They have the ability. They can get a license for sportsmen just like anybody else. I was aware of the city of Beechwood having no involvement in Beechwood City Schools, pool program, that some of our residents, take advantage of. Okay, but no, just. I still have the mic.
I'm letting Mayor Sarin finish.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask one more quick question when he gets done with this. I understand on a base level though, you're saying no.
On a base level,
it's not going to happen.
It's not just a no. Okay. It's not just a no. And I think one of the things that we should also take into account is when I asked the question, why can't the school district do it? And they told me they were legally prohibited by the Ohio Revised Code. It's not true. And they were mistaken. And they told me they had a legal opinion to that effect.
Again, people can read different opinions. They can read their relationships with the state. They can read these things differently in every case. The case was the school said, here's what we're willing to do. And we're asking you to do a little bit to make this happen for residents. And it's about trust. It's this goes to a bigger issue of trust.
For you, and
trust.
I understand that you have a long relationship with the schools. And and that makes sense. I mean, I do too. You know, our son went through the schools, but I'll say this:
It's his job to develop trust to some level with the school district. It's his job.
Mr. Dew. Yeah, well, this is
how about a bare minimum so we can make this work?
This is the question that well, let's not.
Again, it's not about swimming. It's not about swimming. It's about the bigger picture, but it's about our institutions working well together, which they don't. I mean, you can admit that they don't.
Yes, ma'am.
Heights, there was swimming at the Heights High School in their swimming pool. It was worked out between the school and the school board. The city had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that before I do want to finish my answer to your question, and I think that it's an important thing for us long term to think about in this relationship between the school district and the city. You know, I think that the city has been probably more accommodating in certain ways than we have been in the past under my tenure here. There were things that we were charging them for that we are no longer charging them for. I've been trying to steadily move away from them having to pay for crossing guards, for instance. The tennis courts that they use, the Denison field that they use, the ice, the hockey rink and all of this that they use are free they've been free for their use. And I think that it would probably generate a great deal of understanding and goodwill if they would take a look at their facility that they made a promise to the people to make available and consider their options and talk to Beechwood City Schools and say, hey, how do you do this? Now, they've said they won't. But my question for everybody who challenges me on this is, where is the similar energy for the people who ultimately have the immediate authority to grant you access?
Okay, it's fine. I just wanted an answer, yes or no. Is swimming going to start next week? But this is a follow-up question. I think you'll care about.
If the school board decides, they can certainly make it available.
That's fine. I just have a follow-up question that's on this. It's in the similar vein, and then I will not ask another question all night, I promise. Almost 2 years ago, you came to the rec board, and we had a really great interaction with the community around prospects to rebuild Cumberland. 2 years ago. What has happened to those plans? We thought that was a great springboard when we should have shovels, I think, ready to go in the ground next week, and we don't.
So in that committee meeting, I know that this is something that you and I have had some difficulty with, Ms. Coslin. I'm sure this is one of those things that has been a sticking point between the two of us. And it's, obviously still a swimming concern, and we can, get to more. We hired some consultants to do a study about what it would take and what the options might be for rebuilding Cumberland. Now, I think that this is a complicated conversation. And the reason why it's complicated is because we have a lot of people who really love Cumberland as it is. They want it improved. They don't want it changed, for the most part. Not dramatically changed, certainly. But if it does not apply to you, okay, so let me try to rephrase. They would like the pool. They would like the pool and the facilities improved, fixed. Things that are damaged to be fixed. Things that are in disrepair to be brought back to great shape. Those sorts of things. But they like the function as it is. There are many people who feel that way, who have expressed feeling that way. Changed, when I say changed, I mean significantly changed in terms of the way that the space is used. Some people, who have brought up, again, going back to Beechwood, the city of Beechwood and their family aquatic center. There are many people who maybe don't mind, some water slides or, play areas, but they don't want it to impact negatively the current use of the pool, right? And some people just don't want slides. They don't want an amusement park, right? I get that. Everybody has their particular opinion about what the best amenity might be. That's a complicated conversation because we need to take into account the opinions of the people who have a longstanding relationship with the pool, who use the pool, who love the pool, who've loved the pool for their whole lives. Maybe generations of their family have loved the pool and used it.
That night, 2 years ago. They were all there.
Maybe so.
Everybody was
Well, not everybody. And this is why. Just hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. Just hear me out. You don't have to. Just hear me out.
All I know is the conversation hasn't continued. That's my question. Why hasn't the conversation continued the last 2 years?
Getting to that. So, the people who weren't there primarily were the people who live in the city who maybe don't use the pool, who would be less likely to come to a meeting like that because they don't feel like the pool's for them. The classic example, I've discussed this a million times, other people brought this to my attention, is maybe the parent who's got a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And they'd love to go to a pool in their community and enjoy it with their 2 kids. The 6-year-old would be in the pool. The 2-year-old would need to be in the toddler waiting area, right?
No, but that's.
Okay. Would likely need to be there.
Now they're skating forward. So I just don't understand again.
Let's not nitpick. This is an example. Just hear me out for a second. You know, if you're going to ask the question.
Everybody hears you out. Be succinct.
It's a hard conversation. I know. It's a difficult thing. You don't want to make the choice.
So just
I get
listen.
it.
Just listen for a second. Now, in the course of that conversation, there were a lot of people who were excluded from that conversation. I think that they should be included. I think that it's important for them to be included. I think that we need a community-wide conversation about what Cumberland becomes in the future. However, in that particular moment in time, the cost and the time frame that was estimated by those consultants was unattractive. Not something anybody wanted. The concept of closing down the pool, you know, for 1.5 seasons was not something anybody wanted, including me. Now, I was concerned that if it was necessary, and no matter what, if something's necessary and we need to rebuild the pool and this is how long it has to take, then maybe we need to bite the bullet. But what I didn't want to do was allow things like supply chain issues and wars in foreign countries to have a negative impact on us actually getting the job done, right? And so my hope was that we could do repairs, address some of the more glaring concerns about Cumberland, keep the current function, hopefully make some improvements, and continue that while the community decided what it could be in the future. Now, Cumberland does need to be rebuilt, period. That's a fact. How we pay for it, what it eventually becomes, is a conversation. And the people of Cleveland Heights will probably need to determine that, possibly through a bond issue at some point. But that is also something that I did not want to rush. Now, obviously, a couple years later, we're still discussing the possibility. And I think we're probably in a better place right now than we were then when it comes to supply chain, when it comes to the speed of execution on a rebuild, when it comes to our internal capacity to manage a project like that. I think that we are in a better shape now than we were then. So there's that. Now, we've got some plans, and we've been having some discussion this year about what Cumberland could become. We've still got some various options. One of them is that zero depth entry on one side of the pool, maintaining lap lanes on the other side of the pool, but sort of expanding the potential use for many more people who might otherwise not feel comfortable or welcomed or like Cumberland is for them, right? And so I think that the city will take on that task. If you think that that was the priority, that's fine. We've all got different priorities. I think that it is a priority. I think that it is something that Cleveland Heights needs to do. We haven't gotten to it yet. We can't get to everything at once.
Okay. First of all, I'm just going to finish up with that. The summer after that forum that we had, I was expecting to see city employees coming around the pool talking to people to find out what they did want, because I think that is an important component. But that conversation just ended that night. And so I don't think you have any more input from the community than you did that night, and that was wasted time. But I'm not going to talk about the pool anymore. I'm going to talk about the charter. And went to this morning's meeting at at City Hall, and I went in with one opinion, and I'm telling you, I changed my mind, and I'm going in with a second one, which I think is what mature people do, is when they listen to information, they take it in. And I was concerned. I think the Charter Review Committee has done a phenomenal job. I think what failed to happen, the communications director's piece that went out to the city should have said why we need a new charter, because we need a new charter because we don't have a city manager. And our charter now refers to the city manager and the council. And it's a form of government that is no longer applicable to our city. So I know you're thinking, but I'm going to finish what I'm saying. It's no longer applicable. We need to have rules that are for the mayor. We need to have rules for council. We have to have a delineation of how this government works as union. And I wish the communications director had prefaced her piece why we need a new charter, because we have an old charter that's not applicable. My turn. I took a long time for me to get this mic. I found it. It was all over, the phones and the internet, like what a schlock piece it was that was one-sided, and it was beneath our communications, and should never have gone out like that. The law director didn't approve of it. No one in council approved of it. It went out as a piece that was just not good. But I walked in thinking we shouldn't have this charter review on the November ballot, because we haven't had enough time to talk to people about what's in it, and that people, when they don't understand something, tend to vote no, and we need this change. I walked out after Craig Cobb said something really important to me, that we do not want to saddle the new mayor and the new council with this going through this process all over again. And imperfect, and I'm sure it's imperfect because I have not met perfection yet, but an imperfect charter means that they have the rules laid out, and now they can go on to first collecting garbage and doing all the things that need to be done. And I do not want to saddle our new administration with going through the months and months that we've already been through. It's time for us to get this settled and move on. And I'm only going to stay for a certain amount of rebuttal.
Well, I'm not exactly sure why you're expecting a rebuttal.
Well, from what I read in the communications, it looked like the charter that was being created was what I read was this is a charter that's being created to limit severely the power of the administration. And I believe that there are limits on there, and I believe there are limits on council, and I believe that there are a million other things addressed. But that's what I was reading when I read that piece on the city newsletter. Okay,
well, I don't know about sort of whether or not this is a rebuttal, but I do think that it's maybe a clarification. The way that I read what went out related to the changes that are found in this working draft is that, there are some significant changes. I think significant changes is not necessarily a value judgment. It's, in a certain respect, right? Whether they're significant or not. I think, and so maybe this is just my opinion, and people can share it or disagree with me if they want to. I think that giving council the authority to vote up or down the termination of a director is a significant change. Now, whether it's a good change or a bad change, that's a different conversation. I think it's a significant change. I think that expanding beyond planning, finance, and law, the confirmation of all directors potentially is a significant change. I think that allowing council the authority to remove a mayor is a significant change. I think that those things are significant changes and require, obviously it's up to the people of Cleveland Heights whether or not they want those changes, but I think that they are significant changes. And I think that the communication that went out classed them as significant changes, significant increases in council's authority in those particular arenas. I don't even think that the removing the mayor, that authority to council was even mentioned, which is an extremely significant change and probably would have been more inflammatory than anything else. But the subpoena power as well for council is a significant change and increase in their authority. I think it is. It's just
some
on
of
its
those
face.
changes were actually mandated by Ohio law. They were just, there were changes in there, and you can read it when you read the piece, that this is here because Ohio law requires this.
We might have to do a little bit more of a deep dive if you have that in front
I'm
of you.
not going to do a deep, what
No
I
deep
am
dive.
going to
Okay.
say, and my original point was that we've got a new council and we're going to have a new mayor, and what kind of work do we want them doing? And they can either be doing work on the charter, which may have significant or less significant changes taking place, or they can do other work, but if they're working on the charter, they're doing less of something else. And
We have seen that, yes, over the past 3 years.
that concerns me greatly. I would like, you and I could throw things at each other about who is the problem there.
I'm
And we're not
kidding a
going to do
little
that,
bit.
right?
Kidding a little.
Because we're too grown up for that. But do I want them working on other significant issues, or do I want them continuing the discussion about the charter? I walked in one way thinking this ain't going to pass in November, so let's just wait, and walked in thinking, no, I want them. I have a clean slate with the rules set up so they can go about governing appropriately.
But that begs the question of what rules. So yes, the rules would be set up, but the rules as even, if, oh yes, I do. I see that exactly as the mayor said. At least a few of them are extreme changes. I watched the meeting, and they've said, well, yes, they I think recognize to a certain degree when they listened to some of the people that spoke, saying that when I read that, it looks like you are transferring power to council and diminishing the power of the mayor to the extent that it's almost like we have a city manager again, which is exactly what I know many people in Cleveland Heights wanted to begin with, was to maintain the city manager form of government. Yes, but Robin, so to vote on it now would mean that we want those people that are up there right now in power to have that power indefinitely, and the people that are running for council to have that power, and whoever's the mayor to have his hands tied. And I think that the actual motivation for this at this moment is retaliatory and petty. I know you disagree, but I don't think that you're making it sound like it's just that your opinion is just the way it is. Just the same thing with yes, it's clearly an opinion. Yes, it's opinion. Yes. And there were a number of opinions at that meeting as well.
Change from when I walked into council, what I do want, where do I want council to spend their time? Do I want them spending more time on the charter, or do I want them spending more time on addressing pool issues?
That would be that's yeah.
I would like it to be soon.
I would like to be right.
Yes, I think that's the thing. Right rather than soon. And
Thank you for coming. Okay, so I did want to address a little bit about some of the changes that have been suggested. Now, I did not today have a chance to watch the meeting that they held this morning. Was it I think 10 a.m. Had a public hearing just for people who are not familiar. There was a public hearing today. Council had a public hearing, well, a special committee of the whole public hearing to discuss proposed charter changes. And there are a variety of charter changes that, in a certain way have no impact whatsoever. Like some of the changes relate to whether or not we're saying that it's 2/3 of the council who approves something versus 5 of 7 or something like that. And, that doesn't have an actual substantive change. But then there are other changes to the charter that are being proposed that are substantial. And the lovely thing about this is that the city gets to determine how it's governed in this way. And so the city of Cleveland Heights will figure this out one way or another, and it will get the government it wants. And the key is, though, that we need to understand the changes and understand the potential ramifications of the changes and the significance of the changes and what good and bad those changes might bring to our city. And so there are certain things that I have some concern about that I might be less in favor of personally, and not based on my current status as the mayor, because obviously when these go into effect, I don't think that they will impact me in this role. But thinking about a future Cleveland Heights, where a mayor can be removed by the council for nonfeasance, let's say, not doing something that they should have done. So for instance, maybe council could determine that a mayor isn't making sure that parking tickets are being enforced as well as they should, and that qualifies as nonfeasance. Now that's an extreme, strange example, but council determining what the mayor's priorities are, and then determining that the mayor has not met those priorities, and determining that that's nonfeasance, and they can eliminate that mayor if they want to. I think that there is a lot of room for political abuse of that particular authority. Now, it is difficult, and we saw this at the federal level. It can be very difficult for a legislative body to, the Congress, to impeach a president and remove them. We've seen this play out for good or for ill. In this case, we're talking about a much smaller group of people making that determination. And, I've said it a million times, when we don't have very much of the big P political partisan, party politics, difficulty, or we're pretty disproportionately one party over the other when it comes to political affiliation here. And so we don't have as much of that, but we find other ways to be partisan, always. That's just how it works. Factions are created, political alliances and opponents and that kind of thing. It's just the nature of the system. And what we see right now on council is a very secure, and this is just realpolitik, a very secure veto-proof majority on council. That's what we see. I don't know if anybody, yes, each council member has their own vote. They vote their conscience, right? That kind of thing. At the same time, if you look at the track record, it seems like a pretty secure veto-proof majority. And, even though it is not specifically spelled out, the information that I've gotten, the feedback that I've gotten directly from council members is that there is a hierarchical structure at play in the council. They defer a great deal to the council president, and that's how council chooses how it behaves. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just the thing. One example, I'm not trying to make a vague sort of allegation that I can't back up or anything like that. One good example, earlier this year, I was hoping to collaborate with the council on how the administration would do our financial reporting, how the administration would do our budgetary process. And so I reached out to 2 council members. And I specifically chose those 2 council members for what I thought were really good reasons, practical reasons. One was the chair of the Administrative Services Committee. And that committee deals with the code section that our processes are outlined in. So the changes that we would be making, Administrative Services has that domain. The other was the chair of the Finance Committee. Obviously, the Finance Committee deals with financial reporting and budgeting and that kind of thing. And so it was a natural combination. I wanted to have 2 council members collaborating with me, with the finance director, to get a better understanding, working with us, not requiring a public meeting in order to do it, so we can just get together, work session, really hammer some things out, give them a better understanding in a granular way of the processes that we use, the systems that we deal with, the labor intensiveness of these processes, all of this stuff. And those 2 in particular are not members of each other's committees, which is important because if you get a quorum of a committee together, it is required to be a public meeting, right? And so it was convenient in that way that they were not members of each other's committees, so we could bring the chair from each of those committees. We wouldn't be violating Open Meetings Act laws, and we could work together. And so I approached these 2 council members, and I told them my idea. They both said yes to working with me. They asked me to send an email letting the rest of council know that we would be doing this. And so I did that. And the response that I got was not in favor of that particular plan. One of the council members told me that it was disrespectful of the council and of council leadership. I had subsequently one of my weekly meetings with the council president and vice president, where the council president told me in no uncertain terms that this was not going to happen, and that if I was going to be working with anyone, it would be him. And I was a little taken aback because, from my perspective, each one of these people is independently elected. And these 2 individuals in particular, based on their committee roles and maybe them as people, I thought could work with the administration and really, hammer some things out. And so I told the council president, these people have independent agency. They've agreed to this. Why are you saying that this can't happen? And we had a disagreement about that. I felt one way, he felt a different way. And my understanding, based on their expression to me, is that these 2 council members, these 2 committee chairs, had a conversation with the council president and came back to me and told me, no, they're not doing it. That indicates to me sort of a hierarchy. That indicates to me an informal hierarchy, because the council officers, the president and vice president, have very specific duties. Commanding the council is not one of them. But you can informally create these structures. With that said, I know that's a lot of preface, but when it comes to these charter changes, what I'm finding is that in that hierarchical structure, you do start to create, and you see it it's not specific to Cleveland Heights, you start to create these power structures that build. The person who has the power it's much more easily done to build more if you've already got a certain level of authority, if that's your goal, if that's your aim. And so the people in charge can more easily get more authority. And so in this case, it occurs to me that when you've got a veto-proof majority, and you start to accumulate power in that single branch of government, you start to get away from checks and balances. If you're talking about checking the legislative body, if you've got a secure, reliable veto-proof majority, basically the one check that the administration might have is the veto. And I don't know. Everybody can look at this and decide that we can't predict the future, but we can make some, I think, reliable predictions about whether or not, especially when council much more often votes things up or down on either a 6-1 or a 7-0 basis. There's not going to be very much opportunity for a mayor to veto anything. That's my guess. Not very much opportunity. There might be some, but not for a mayor to veto anything with any staying power. And so what you do when you start consolidating power in that legislative branch, when you already see you have a demonstrable track record of that veto-proof majority, when you start consolidating more power in that branch, it starts to get a little lopsided. That's my concern for the future government and the city of Cleveland Heights. Now, if that's what the city of Cleveland Heights wants, then that is what they will design and choose. And that is an important concept to maintain in the front of our minds, is that the people of Cleveland Heights get to pick the government in the form of government that they want, even if it's something that I personally think could be problematic.
Did we not already choose just recently?
Well, I mean, we in 2019, we made some pretty major changes. I know that particular effort was a partial effort. And I we can go back and forth about this. I think they could have probably included more in those changes. I don't think that they were restricted in the ways that they thought they were. Case in point was them removing the authority of the city council to create, modify, and abolish departments and grant that to the mayor. Now, that was something that was, if you're talking about a single subject charter change, if you can do that, then you can make a wide variety of other changes related to the inclusion of a strong mayor. And I know people don't like strong mayor. It's just a term of art. It's not a quality designation or something like that. It's just a term of art indicating that the mayor has executive authority. Yeah, so we made that change. We did make that change in 2019. And I think that one of the problems from 2019 and on, even through 2021 and beyond, is that I know I was not allowed to lead a discussion as the administrative services chair on council. I was not allowed to lead a discussion about additional charter changes or legislative changes that would be more in line with that shift to a mayor council form of government. There were rules put in place where the council president needed to approve any topic that a committee chair might bring up and have a meeting about. There were rules put in place where a council member could not independently introduce legislation without getting someone else on council's approval to even introduce. And I can say that I think those changes were mostly directed at me. At least that was the impression I got. And I think it really inhibited our ability to make the other ancillary changes that would have made this transition a lot smoother. Because there's a lot of confusion in a half-done charter change. You do want to get it right. I wish that in the design of that charter change that we voted on in 2019, that campaign committee had done a little bit more outreach to the people who were living it. I could have provided them a great deal of insight that they could have, taken or left, but there were certain problems that I think we could have avoided if they had sought more insight. And maybe we're in the same position now in a certain respect where I think what you said, we want to get it right. Yeah, something needs to happen. Changes need to be made. Obviously, the current setup is not great in that it's not, we can get more perfect, but we do want to get it right.
It just appeared that so many of the changes were
Oh, well, I
Yeah.
hear you. I understand.
Well, and also, I'm concerned. You said that Cleveland Heights will get the government that Cleveland Heights wants. How is that going to happen with the vote that at this? We are voting that this would be voted on September 9th? No. Oh, but
The community can, as a whole, say no on November.
and November went to not to. It's,
Time constraint to get it past this next 2 weeks to get on November. That's the bigger
yeah,
issue here. And
yeah.
the fact that
I think that's the larger issue, and we don't even need to get into this proposed language is better than this or whatever. It's the fact that no one even knows about this. I mean, some people, the regular people that show up to meetings, that are informed, that follow all of these things closely, the vast majority of residents of Cleveland Heights have no idea. And that's the problem, not just with this, although this is a major, obviously overarching thing, with everything though. We hear from the same group of people all the time. The vast majority of people don't know what's going on. They don't come to meetings. They're not providing input. And if it's something as consequential as the charter being amended, there's no risk in slowing down a little bit, doing more outreach and educating and just informing people of what's going on. With this issue, it's the time to actually do that. If we want other constituencies within the city to come and feel represented and feel that they have a voice, other neighborhoods that aren't always at the table when conversations are happening. So I think we got to slow things down. There's no risk in doing that. There's no risk in waiting until spring. At least no risk that I can see.
Yeah.
Does not seem to be a legitimate concern. Go ahead.
That council would be completely taken up with this for the first quarter of the year. So there are many charter changes. There's a whole long list of them, 43 pages. Could they be separated out so you have the detailed administrative crap that none of us really care about, and sort that into a basket, and then the big significant balance of power stuff put off until next year, so that I have to say that I've been critical of Future Heights and crowdsourced conversations, because I see this kind of stuff, and usually it has to do with, little feel-good zhuzh changes that you're going to have in your neighborhood, or what do you want it to look like when we rebuild Severance? This, I don't know. I'm a skeptic, but what a great opportunity for Future Heights to have crowdsourced conversations around the charter, because you can have them in Caledonia and the Noble Library and the Lee Road, not just the Lee Road Library, not just more neighborhoods. We want to know, what do the rich people in Ambler Heights think, and what do the people in Caledonia, and what do the people on the South Euclid border think, and to be able to have council informed and hear directly from the people before they put it on a ballot. And also, then we would be educated about it.
Well, one of the things that I've learned over the course of doing this job is we in government sometimes think we're doing a really good job of outreach. We're going out, we're having meetings. There are people there talking to us about the topic. They showed up. They're yelling at us sometimes. They're engaged. But it is very easy. I think this city does it really well. It's really easy to feel like we're a small town. And the reason why it feels that way sometimes, I think, is because we are very focused on the people that are in the room. And we forget that there are, 43, 44,000 other people out there who didn't know that the meeting was happening, or if they knew, they didn't understand why it might affect them. And so they're not in the room. And you can't bring 44,000 people into every room you're having the discussion in. That's impossible. We don't have the capacity for that. But what that means is that we find ourselves talking about something for a very long time, getting to the end of a process, and then when we're at the end and we're like, hey, it's time to approve this thing or reject it, we get a flood of people who say, wait, what are you guys talking about? I'm just hearing about this now. And, I know people are going to say that I'm blaming.
And many of them are on council.
Well, I'm not going to go there, but I do think that, we all have this shared responsibility. It's not a moral failing to have life happen to you, because life is happening to all of us. And, the fact that somebody has to go to work and come home and feed the kids and, do all the things. And there is very little time. There's very little space for the minutia of local government. And so that can be a difficult ask. I don't want to pretend like it's just some easy lift for everybody to just be involved all the time. It's not an easy lift. It takes some work. And so I don't want people to think that I'm blaming people for not being involved, not being informed. It is a hard thing to do. We're a small group here. A lot of people could be here tonight asking me all kinds of questions, challenging my opinion on things. They do it online. Maybe they could be here having a conversation instead of, well, maybe. Yeah. Sometimes people don't want to hear the answer. That's true. But a lot of times it's really just they can't make the time. Life is too busy sometimes. Now, that does mean that with really significant changes, sometimes you got to wait. Sometimes you have to get to the point where people are like, hey, wait a minute, what's happening? And then you say, okay, we're going to dial this back. We're going to pull this back. We're not going to rush it through. Sometimes you got deadlines and you need to. But with other things, you're making the deadlines yourself. And in this case, I think that's one of those circumstances where there is no actual deadline being imposed on us. I do not know what Ms. Coslin was talking about when she was saying that certain charter changes were required by Ohio law. That's not something that I've ever heard. We are a charter community, so and this is the charter that we are creating. There might be things that we are changing to be more in tune with Ohio law, but I don't know that many of these are.
If I was hearing correctly, the only thing where I heard that mentioned was in regards to the subpoena power by the law director. Something about that was in tune, or that was something that would be
implied powers, implied investigatory powers that would be cemented in a more concrete, explicit way in the charter.
Okay.
And actually, this is something, when the Charter Review Commission was doing its work, they brought various people in and asked people to provide input. Granting council subpoena power was something that I suggested to the Charter Review Commission. I thought that it should be something, and this is sort of based on where I know this kind of abuse can happen. We see it at the federal level all the time. These, some of these just completely specious subpoenas and ridiculous fishing expeditions, imagined conspiracy theories, and that kind of thing. You want to avoid that as much as possible. And so for a group this small, 7 people, I thought that there should be some restrictions on the use of subpoena power. Maybe it would need to be a unanimous vote to issue a subpoena, just to, make sure that the gravity of something like that is felt, and that you'd have less likely use of that kind of authority for purely political purposes dressed up as policy purposes. And so, but that was something that I suggested in order to, formalize that, make it explicit, have it understood. Everybody knows the rules of the road. I thought that a corresponding authority and a check on the legislative branch was probably important too, because them investigating themselves, I don't know where that's ever worked. But in this case, they took one piece of that, and you can see all of the recommendations that I made. I think they're all still on the website, and other people who responded, council members also responded to the call for suggestion. You can take a look at all of those that I suggested to the Charter Review Commission, and I believe the Charter Review Commission interviews that they did are also on our YouTube page for people to review. Like, some of these things might be good ideas if done properly, and sometimes the details matter. In this case, I do have some major concerns about subjecting an elected mayor, any elected mayor, to removal by 5 people who may be politically antagonistic to that mayor.
Doesn't sound like the will of the people.
Well, it will be that's the thing. That's the other piece. And I know that this is difficult. It's difficult for me to, accept in a certain respect. But if the people decide that they want the council to be able to remove the mayor without checking in with the people, then it is the will of the people. Of course, yeah, the people can vote down any of these changes, all of the changes in November if they put it on the ballot. Whether or not the people do, I know that electoral politics is flawed because not all of us walk in to the voting booth with the same information. But ultimately, in the aggregate, like I said, Cleveland Heights gets the government that it wants. And so if that is a change that the people of Cleveland Heights want, then they will make that change if council puts it on the ballot and afford council that authority.
Right.
Well, maybe it probably wouldn't have to be that many.
Well, can I say something to that?
Well,
I was going to say something else, but
make sure you use the mic though.
Sorry, I was going to. But yes, 15,000 people. Sadly, is probably true. However, what I see and what I've noticed over the years is that there's a kind of an unspoken other body. There is like the 150 people with the loudest voices who stay on the case and somehow feel that they are, advocating for the city in some sort of quasi spokesperson manner. And it results, what it appears is that many of the things that you have done have not been what the 150 loudest voices think are right. And you'd rather hear from the, 40,000 other people, or at least the 15,000 other people that might be so moved to vote. But what I was going to say is, does it even seem wise during a mayoral campaign to be changing what might appear to be changing the job description? I mean, the people that are running may not want, if they are relegated.
I had not thought of it that way. The people who are running for this position might get a position. 2 of them have a vote, but there are definitely people who are running for that position who may not get the job that they're currently running for. I hear you. And I hadn't thought of it that way. That's an interesting point. Obviously, they've got agency too. If these charter changes are put on the ballot if one of those people doesn't like them, thinks that, one of the people who makes it through the primary and is on the November ballot with these charter changes, makes it through the primary, gets, and wins, they don't have to take the job. It's true. They don't have to.
That's funny.
That's all. No, it's flip, but it's also true. It's
no, I
it's
get
a
it. That's why it's funny.
There is agency there. They can choose not to accept the results of that election and choose not to take that position as it would be changed by these charter changes if they felt that strongly about it. If they think that they can work within these changes and still get something accomplished, more power to them, right? I understand it, but I don't want to take away their agency and their responsibility to choose for themselves whether or not, even in the face of these changes, they want to continue. Yes, you had a. I have a question. Okay.
Could they make it part of their campaign, like voting against November the charter changes?
I mean, honestly, yeah. Any of these candidates, obviously any person, Cleveland Heights resident or not, can advocate for or against any of these charter changes. But yeah, any of the candidates for council or for mayor can express their opinions about these charter changes, either for or against. I know that politics can make that difficult sometimes because you want people to be focused on your candidacy and not necessarily alienate people who might otherwise like you. If you come down on, I don't have a lot of love for that particular perspective. I think, having a bold stance on something, if you feel strongly about something, express it one way or the other. If you don't, then you don't. And that's, I guess, fine too. And that's for people to judge your, credibility as a candidate in that way too. But, yes, they can come out for, against, or indifferent of any of these changes if they wanted to. And that might be something people want to ask them.
Just a quick follow-up. On Melissa's point before that this seems punitive, some of these changes. Right, but Petty, but what's the motivation behind Jim Petras and Davita Russell limiting their own potential future powers?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we can speak. I don't know that we can speak for them. But I do know, at the very least, this discussion began well before anybody thought that I had no chance of being a second-term mayor. No, much of it was recommended. Yeah, like the sections where the council would have the authority to remove a mayor. That was that was recommended. The subpoena power, as I said, I recommended that inclusion to the Charter Review Commission. They included that piece. They didn't include the corresponding check on the council, but they included that. The council can advance whatever they want to the ballot. Well, they have a chance. Well, I don't think we're going to be able to hear you, but she's got the mic too, so I don't want to.
Yeah, my question is, how can we stop this from going on the ballot if it's all possible in November as a citizen?
Okay, so as a citizen, the question is, how can we stop this from getting on the ballot in November? The shortest answer is that you cannot. But that's just a really short answer, and it misses a lot of nuance. You can, lobby your representatives on the council and let them know how you feel about it. You can recruit other members of the community to join your effort. And this is with any change that council has the authority to make. In this case, if you don't want those changes to be on the ballot, that is purely a council authority. They can put these charter changes on the ballot as long as they've got 5 people on the council who are interested in putting them on the ballot. They don't have to ask anybody. But technically, I mean, they represent you in the legislative body. And so the people reaching out to them and making their opinions known, some people will be for it, some people will be against it, and then each council member will have to make two or more calculations, but at least 2. One is how they feel about it, whether they think it is a change that they want to see personally, professionally. The second calculation is, how does this square with the opinions of the people they represent? Those are at least 2 calculations that every council member probably is going to have to make.
That's fine. I know my answer to my own question.
Yes, ma'am.
Be voting no on anything they put on the ballot in November about a charter, because I don't know that much about it now, and I don't see how I would be well enough educated at the time in November to vote for it. So I suggest everybody else do the same thing. Also, back about the swimming pool part.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't get a chance to say what I wanted to say about that. We need a swimming pool here at the community center. Okay, the swimming pool should have been placed here, and if we want a pool where we can swim, let's try to build a pool. There's enough land and space here, and a pool onto this building, and that will solve the pool problem.
Well, listen, you know what? Let me.
We could keep it cool enough so the people who actually want to swim laps could swim, because that Heights pool is so hot that, it's not meant for.
There are a couple things that I do want to show you guys. Give me a second. I'm going to see if I can find it. Okay, so 2 things. First, inspired by the statement about the school's legal opinion about whether or not they have the authority to allow people to swim in their pool without city involvement, I asked for a legal opinion too. And so I've got it here. It's a legal opinion, so it's privilege, attorney-client privilege, but I'm the client, so I can waive privilege if I want to. And so I think I will. So I've got this legal opinion here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but I do want to at least pull out some specific points about the high school pool and city's necessary or not necessary involvement in that. One of the determinations in this legal opinion is that absolutely, yes, the public school district has the legal authority to allow public access and use of their facilities during non-school usage. It says here, Ohio Revised Code 331376 sets forth the authority for the district to provide for community public access of its facilities. All of its facilities, they currently already do this with some of their facilities. Anytime you've gone to Roxborough and walked around the track, you're participating in a community access program, technically, I guess. That too. That's the catch that they say. This goes into more detail. And I think the example of Beechwood City Schools really lets us know what that means too. Thank you. So this is a legal opinion we're talking about. I think this goes a little further than I saw related to the licensee for the pool. And so one of the things that I found interesting in this opinion, one of the questions that the law department looked at was, is the city required to pay for lifeguards for the Cleveland Heights School District swimming pool? Obviously, the answer is no. The applicable law, is set forth under, I guess, ORC section 374904, related to public swimming pool maintenance and operation. And this is something that I've gotten from the law department. And so it's here, and people can take a look at this and clarify things for themselves. But one thing that I thought was interesting was section A of that ORC section. No person shall operate or maintain a public swimming pool, public spa, or special use pool without a license issued by the licensor having jurisdiction. And then beyond that, it talks about the responsibility of the licensee. And it talks about the license to operate, and that no person will, and this includes entities, will operate or maintain a public swimming pool without a license issued by the licensor having jurisdiction. Lifeguards will be provided by the licensee and on duty during the hours of operation is section E4 of 3701, 3104 responsibilities of the licensee. Now, that indicates to me that there's more than just a passive allowance, but that there is maybe some indication that it is a better idea. In fact, it might be required that the school district have some part to play in actually staffing, because they are the licensee, they are the owner of that pool. And lifeguards being provided by the licensee, it sort of indicates a certain responsibility there. But aside from that's just, in this legal opinion, I wanted to provide that to people. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about related to your question, and I think you're right, both the hours of the high school pool that would be available to people are not necessarily as much as we would hope for in the utility of an indoor pool for the residents of Cleveland Heights. And so I do think that the city of Cleveland Heights should very seriously consider building an indoor pool here at the community center. We've taken a look at the possibilities for that, and we have a natatorium addition study from April of this year, where we start taking a look at this. Now, it's preliminary, based on how this year has been. This didn't seem like there was much room in the discourse for a robust discussion about this that wouldn't be tainted in some way by other things. So, but this exists for the government and the people to take a look at and seriously consider when there is space in the discourse for it. And we've got, space here, and it would probably be right over there. I think that's Mayfield over that way. Between the community center and Mayfield, we've got land that could be used for the construction of a natatorium here. And it could be open when the community center's open. It could, obviously, we've got in the plans and in this space, we've got room for locker rooms. We've got room for obviously the pool, the mechanicals. We've got these plans. We've got a conceptual floor plan here, some detailed plans here for the locker rooms, for the mechanicals, for the pool itself, for bleachers, because we could construct a competition usable pool through this. It just takes the people of Cleveland Heights deciding that it's a priority and moving forward with it. It's got to be paid for. We got to figure that out.
There's talks about putting that plan up at some point, right?
Yes, actually, yes. So this is a preliminary plan. We're probably going to throw it up on the website for people to take a look at. I converted each of these pages to a JPEG so that I can put it online as well, because PDFs don't really show up on Facebook easily. And so we're going to be putting this up. We've got sort of this would require the creation of a detention basin for stormwater and that kind of thing, because we would be taking away some green space that otherwise would allow water to sink into the ground a little bit easier. I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet. These are plans that are independent of each other, and I would not want to presume what the people of Cleveland Heights would make their priority. What I would support?
We're not lucky enough to keep them.
We won't know. It doesn't matter.
Well, okay, no, but no. if there are people who are still out there who, Mr. Let's just. Well, I'm not concerned.
Am I allowed to say what Mr. Cobb said at Melody's party? Can I say what Mr. Cobb
What
said
I
at Melody's
don't know
party?
right
Can I
now
just name
is
you
what
on
the
can I
actual
when he said
cost
there's
and
no room for
timeline would
renovating
be.
Cumberland Pool?
We've got a little bit of information here. So, for instance, total proposed budget
No, that's not-
as of this year. I don't want to pretend like this is something that I want to hang my hat on, though. We're looking at around $18 million for the indoor pool, right? Now, I think that's doable. It's definitely doable for the city of Cleveland Heights. In terms of the Cumberland changes, let's see, we're looking at around $14 million as an estimate here. So if we wanted to do both and we could rely on these estimates, that's a lot of money, right? Now, is it a lot of money over 30 years? It's not as daunting as it might otherwise be, but it's also something that we can plan for. And maybe we do Cumberland because Cumberland is an urgent need. And then we plan for and prepare for the construction of an auditorium if the people of Cleveland Heights decide that that's something that's important to them. When it comes to fixing what we've got, redevelopment is always a good idea, especially in our context. We're built out. So fixing what we've got, fixing Cumberland, just from a practical perspective, seems to me to be the most immediate priority. But I don't want to place my opinion above the people of Cleveland Heights on this. Well, yeah. I mean, sorry.
I'd like to. Is this on? Okay. I'd like to switch from pressing first world problems like our swimming pool to actual development.
Yeah.
Here we are talking about $14 million here and $18 million here for the pool or a two-pool community, where it at the same time looks like major developments could be imperiled because city council doesn't want to spend this much money, much less than anything that a pool would require. I'm extremely nervous about the signals that council sends to developers. It's like, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. I am particularly, as a not wealthy old person, I walk a thin line. And so things like the National Church residence is a marvelous idea, which I might say almost got tanked because someone on city council thought that walking 500 feet to a garage or not getting enough money for their parking lot was enough reason to tank multiple residences and a much more solid future for an ever-growing section of our population. All indications point to ever-increasing difficulty for people in my situation. And if the city isn't going to step up and provide some basic stuff, I'm going to have to go somewhere else. And I love living here. That's what I say.
Well, I appreciate that. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Fixed. I call it a broken income.
Yeah,
but
yeah. And so I know.
No kidding.
True. I think it's one of the things that one of the development team at Sustainable Community Associates talked about at the last meeting where the Park Synagogue project was discussed, was you don't sort of save your way out of this, you grow your way out of this. The move right now is to invest so that we can grow. I think that people do on its face recognize the need to develop an environment where population growth is possible, where equitable and affordable housing and I would say a more integrated and diverse economically housing options are possible, improving that, increasing that. And I think most people recognize that increased housing supply is something that not only do we need here in Cleveland Heights, but we need it throughout the region. We probably need it nationwide. I remember maybe, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, sitting, I was on a board of this population dynamics group, and Albert Ratner was a member of this group as well. And back then we were all talking about knocking houses down. And that was important because we had a bunch of houses that couldn't be saved. Financially, it just wasn't feasible. They were, having demonstrable negative impact on the neighborhood surrounding them. We needed to knock houses down. And he started talking about, no, we need more supply. Yeah, okay, knocking them down. We've been knocking them down. We're going to need to build. We need to focus on that. Now, whether he had a crystal ball or anything, or he was just looking at all the same information everybody else was, yeah, we knew we needed to knock things down because people were getting dragged into those houses. They were being used for nefarious purposes. They were, devastating neighborhoods, right? So we had to do something, and the financial environment would not allow us to invest in saving those houses because the public sector couldn't do it all. And the private sector won't do it if you have to put $120,000 into a house and you can only sell it for $100,000, right? So, but he was talking about supply, and we're still there. We still need more supply. We still need to aggressively pursue this stuff, and we need to stop slow walking it. Now, that's hard though, obviously. I don't think that it's just, specific to these personalities. I think that in general, there is in the public sector a lot of fear that you're going to miss something, a lot of fear that somebody's trying to pull a fast one, a lot of fear that you don't know as much as the developer knows about building things, and that's why you're susceptible to getting fooled, that kind of thing. It's not completely unfounded either. Most public officials do not know development very well. That's just the facts. There are some things that I have hoped to do to help prepare public officials in Cleveland Heights. I've been talking about it with some of the people in planning neighborhoods and development to try to get people a little bit of additional training for capacity building and that kind of thing. That'll probably happen after I'm gone if it happens. But it's something that we desperately need. We need to build confidence in the people who make the decisions, and we need to set the goals. We need to set the philosophy around development for the organization as well. And I think that that's kind of where, so far, we have not done a good job in Cleveland Heights.
Right.
We don't have a development philosophy.
Yeah.
We do not have a coherent development philosophy. Where you see that play out is, you can elect a mayor who wants to aggressively pursue development, who's reaching out to developers, trying to get people to, participate, making it a focus. I've had developers tell me, we never get mayors calling us. This is great, and that feels nice, but it doesn't feel as nice when you run into the brick wall. And sometimes the brick wall comes in a couple different forms. Sometimes it's, no, we don't want to make a zoning change that would allow for a modern use of this land. And the reason why we don't want to do it is because there will be, 10 families really mad at us about changing, the land that's 2 blocks away, right? And so like all of that conspires because the only thing we hate more than the way things are is change, right? And
Change is scary.
Change is scary, and that's understandable. And yes, change is scary. Any change, even if it's a positive change, it's scary. Compounded by the fact that there feels like there's this information and expertise asymmetry between the decision makers and the people asking for the decision. We're putting people in a, I'll be charitable, I'll be generous here. We're putting people in a difficult position. We're asking people to make decisions where they don't really have a great deal of confidence about what the effect and the impact of their decision will be. And that's hard. And we need to have some empathy for that. We do. But what that requires is work. And that requires some work on the part of residents to create a better group of partners, and that's our responsibility as the population, to make sure that either they're educated or we pick people who can be. And that's an ongoing, universal issue in every jurisdiction, right? In this case, though, we see our neighbors changing course. Shaker Heights is a wonderful example of this. Shaker Heights was the bedroom community. More than us. You got to run. No, it's fine. Shaker Heights, though, in recent years, has shifted its strategy because it knows that if it does not evolve, it will stagnate. And you don't want to do that as a city. You don't want to manage decline, especially in a region that is not growing, a region that is simply spreading. We've had the same population regionally. It's just everybody's spread out, right? Our central city has lost, 900,000 people, right? We were at 1.2 I don't remember exactly what the peak was, but they're at 400,000 now. And, that's, I could be wrong about the initial number, but it's been a dramatic change and a spreading out, a sprawl of our population. Bringing people back into the central city and the inner ring is a task. And in order to do that, we need to redevelop. And in order to effectively redevelop, we got to change. We could fill every single vacant lot in this city with exactly what was there before. The single family house was there. Well, we'll put another one. If 2 houses were on this parcel at the corner of Coventry and Cedar, well, damn it, we're going to put 2 single family houses there because that's what was there before. If we do that, we will still not get to our peak population. We need to do things differently in order to grow. Mm-hmm. And that takes courage. It takes a bit of bold action. And so what you're saying about, whether or not it's the council or some other approval body that has some control, some influence over how we develop. On one hand, I think that we need to give them a little bit of grace in certain ways because I think that they are put in a difficult position. They're being asked to make decisions that they might not have as firm a grasp on the people asking them to make the decision have, right? But at the same time, this is the conversation that we have in campaign season where we say, what do you see? What's your vision for development? Now, I had a vision. It was aggressively pursue that, focus on increasing density because that's something that will benefit our business districts. That's something that will benefit the vitality of our neighborhoods. Safety, you get more eyes on a street, more feet in a business district. Absolutely. That's what creates safety. More activity is contagious as well. So that was my vision for development in this city. I think that we've tried to pursue that pretty well, and we've made some progress. We're continuing to try to make more. But one of the things that we haven't done is try to take that mayor's vision, and this goes back to how we view the governing of the city. If we're expecting the mayor to have a vision and then be empowered and partnered with to implement that vision, then you got to give the mayor, and maybe the next mayor will have an easier time of it, got to give the mayor the space and the grace to implement that vision. Everybody says they want, to make it easier to build houses. But then when you got people who want to build houses in your city and you say, well, you're going to have to tell us what color the shutters are going to be before we'll approve this purchase agreement. Then you're creating hurdles that you could avoid, and you are turning people off. And then, at that point, you find yourself in a position where you don't have a great supply of developers who want to do business in your community. There might still be a few people who want to, but when you reduce that competition, you're not getting, your best choice potentially even. And so that's the kind of work that we still need to do. And when it comes to a development philosophy, that development philosophy needs to be shared, at least at the higher level. So you don't find yourself in a position where you've got a mayor who is aggressively pursuing development, and then you've got, a planning commission who is too scared to make changes that would allow for the development, or a council that, really wants to make that extra, $10,000 on a parcel because they're thinking short term, right? Or the hurdles, you've had 2 community meetings, but we wanted you to have 4 before you even, had something before the council. Those sorts of hurdles in action make it more difficult to actually achieve the vision. We're not rowing in the same direction here. We got to put our money where our mouths are, and we have to do it as partners. We have to do it as a unit. When we have a shared development philosophy, we can do that. And it's synergetic, but more than that, it gives developers an understanding at the outset. That's another thing that SCA talked about was, what are the values that you are seeking to include here? Is it prevailing wage? Is it, LEED certification? Is it this or that? Do we really have to compare our loan interest rate to Bank of America's? No, I don't think we need to get that granular when it comes to that kind of approval. But, are we unnecessarily placing hurdles in the way of our own redevelopment? I think we are, and we have been. I think that we can fix it, though. And I think that we shouldn't villainize just based on people's reluctance, because I think some of it is potentially born out of a real concern that they would be doing harm if they say yes to something. And I don't want to put people in a position where they don't feel informed enough. We need to create the environment where they have a level of comfort. Some of it I think is not valid. I think some of it is based on preconceived notions and biases about the validity and the credibility of the source of the information. And that's unfounded. But I think we can fix it. I think Cleveland Heights can fix it if it wants to.
Can you give short answers?
I'll do my best.
I want you to talk about Lower Lake and the consent decree and where we are, because it was 2017. No, it was 2021 when Black and Veatch said spend $28 million of your ARPA money, and council said, no, because we want to give more Christmas presents to our friends. So we spent 18 million, or we're still in the process of spending, because Clinkscale's knocking down those SSOs like dominoes. But I suspect that we'll have another round with GPD and Black and Veatch. Do you have a sense of the timeline?
So my expectation.
And Lower Lake, are we going to pay, or is sewer district going to pay? Because we're paying, we the people. Do you pay your bill? Yeah, I do too. 3 of them. So
Okay, so I'll address the consent decree first. This is, for the people who don't have the background, Cleveland Heights built its sewer system a very long time ago. That sewer system was maybe state of the art at the time. It was built into bedrock, so they were trying to do this efficiently. They did sort of shared trench, but separated channels for storm and sanitary sewer. But when you have a major rainfall, storm and sanitary mix in that shared trench, and that's problematic. It's not, a combined sewer overflow issue, but that combination that occurs in that system is problematic based on the Clean Water Act. We're not supposed to be polluting our waterways, and so the EPA reached out to the city of Cleveland Heights, and my understanding of the story is that the city of Cleveland Heights did not respond proactively to the EPA to the point where they brought the Department of Justice in, and it got a little bit less friendly, more punitive, and they started telling Cleveland Heights that we were going to have to spend $500 million on our sewer system in order to correct these deficiencies under the Clean Water Act. That number is not based in the actual on-the-ground condition of our sewer system. The reason why is because at that time, we didn't know the actual condition of our sewer system because it was built a very long time ago, and we don't actually have as much information about the actual condition right now. We've got a lot more now, but at the time, that $500 million or whatever figure was an estimate based on sort of a worst case scenario. Since then, the administration, I got to give a great deal of credit to the former city manager, Tanisha Briley. I think she proactively, answered the phone when the EPA called and negotiated with them. And this is something that we all, were eventually informed of on council, negotiated with them a partial consent decree that allows the city of Cleveland Heights to do diagnostic work while fixing problems that we uncover as we learn more about our sewer system. Doing the fixes as we plan, as we study, right? That's what we've been doing. When ARPA funds became available from the federal government, the recommendation and my personal preference was that we maximize on the amount of money that we spend on our sewer system. The expected maximum that we could actually spend by the deadline was around $28 million. And the reason for that expense would be to reduce the amount of impact that on sewer ratepayers, because we're all sewer ratepayers in one form or another. And eventually we're going to have to pay for these improvements. If we can use this federal money to make some of these improvements, that means that that's less money out of our individual ratepayer pockets to make the improvements. So that's why I was hoping for 28 million. We started with 18. I was expecting that we would then graduate and do another 10 million. That was not the case, though. Again, when the form of government changed, the budgetary authority determined that they did not want to take my lead on the determination of these funds for the most part. And they told me that this is going to be a council thing. They're going to determine. There were some things that I brought to them that they were interested or at least amenable to funding, but that large figure, council decided that additional $10 million was not going to be spent on the sewers. But so we're still in the position to spend a lot of money over time on our sewer system. I don't believe that the EPA or the DOJ is interested in completely bankrupting the city of Cleveland Heights and demanding that we make all of these improvements all at once. ultimately, I believe that they will negotiate with us a plan that allows us to make improvements over time, necessary improvements that are born out of actual observation of the system and not just sort of predicted issues with the system that haven't been vetted. So I believe that we can, continue on the course that we're on, which is a study and fix as we go. And I hope that the EPA and the DOJ will be cooperative in that effort. So I don't think that we're going to have like a $500 million price tag, that we're going to have to throw into our sewers anytime soon. That's my prediction. We'll see how it goes. But Lower Lake, when I learned that the sewer district was revising its opinion of Lower Lake's flood mitigation properties and therefore revising its commitment to funding the rebuild of the dam at Lower Lake that would allow us to maintain Lower Lake as an amenity, I was disappointed. I'm understating, I think. In part because one of the ways that they convinced us to be cooperative about the removal of Horseshoe Lake in the first place was this plan that Lower Lake would remain because it had some important flood mitigation, flood control properties, and that was important. So they could justify funding the rebuild of that dam, but Horseshoe, they couldn't justify the expense because of the lack of flood mitigation, availability at Horseshoe Lake. So I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under us in that moment. I am not somebody with expertise in the type of science that would, allow me to second guess their determination on this. I know that there are other people who can take a look at other options. I know you've brought up some options, potentially other options that might allow us to maintain some flood mitigation by focusing not just on sort of thinking of these waterways as a conduit or a sewer or something like that, but focusing on other things that we could do in the surrounding. I'm not going to pretend like I can, recount what you've told me already. I think that we should look at this as creatively as possible to see if it's possible to save that in a more creative way. At the same time, I don't like fighting with reality. And if we find ourselves at the end of in a good faith investigation into this issue, and the sewer district, is able to say at the end of that, I told you so, this is the lay of the land, we're not going to fund this. And of course, the city of Shaker Heights and the city of Cleveland Heights have a choice to make. Are we going to be willing to expend dollars, not just for the rebuild, but the maintenance, an ongoing maintenance of the lake, the dredging, the maintenance of the dam itself in accordance with, the requirements of ODNR. And there's a reason why I don't make that decision as mayor unilaterally. And I'm grateful for the lack of that authority, frankly. And I'm torn, to be honest. This is a decision that I don't know what my personal preference is. I love walking around Lower Lake. I love just being there and looking at it. And I know that people felt the same way about Horseshoe, right? I also, and this goes back to our experience talking about Horseshoe, I also feel that the ultimate end at Horseshoe, at that location, will be a positive. I think that, we'll be able to have a shared park space where people's actual enjoyment in the space will be increased. You can't go walk on the lake. It's very rare that you can get your kayak, right? Well, some people can. Everybody, yeah. But I think so. I'm torn because I know that if we do end up in a circumstance where the dam is removed, Lower Lake is drained, and the stream is remeandered, and we create a park around it, I do think that ultimately that will also be a beautiful amenity for people. But again, it's change, and we are losing something if that happens. So I think that we should do our best to maintain what we've got if we can, but also not be so rigid in our grip that we can't see the beauty of the next thing too.
Talking about that, something came to me years ago. Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights defeated this levy for that interstate highway that was going to go through and take the
Clark Freeway, yep.
So yes, so you're fighting the losing battle. Those people who wanted that done, the best way to get it done is to do away with those lakes and put it back on the board and build that highway. So fighting it, I think it's going to be a losing battle.
Well, that is something. You know what?
They're determined that they're going to get that done.
I'll tell you. You know what? This is. I appreciate you saying that. That is not. I haven't thought about it that way before. I hadn't considered that. Okay. Well, I guess if we do remove these lakes, I don't know if. I mean, obviously, this was a while back. The people who were pushing for that probably don't exist anymore. That's true. That's true. And there might be some desire to increase the more massive transportation. Opportunity Corridor has done a lot to increase connectivity regionally. It can be helpful depending. It's a whole hell of a lot easier to get to West 44th or something, West 41st. But I think no matter what, the people of Shaker Heights and Cleveland Heights, recognizing the detriment that the urban renewal cutting through neighborhoods with massive freeways, they're trying to remove that right now in the city of Cleveland. They're trying to increase connectivity to the lakefront. This would fly in the face of what we now know is detrimental. We can't just build highways so that people can leapfrog the inner ring suburbs, leapfrog the central city. We need to have connected communities in a way. Right. Yeah. That's a good point. I think that we should keep that front of mind.
Well,
I'm going to keep it going for a little longer.
I want to insert something before you
Mhm.
stop. Before anybody,
just the hard
about
part.
the violence prevention, if you could touch on that.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Before we break, I do want to talk about the violence prevention program that I've been working on for quite a while, because there is some misinformation out there about the status of that program, the status of that grant, and I'd like to give people a little additional information before. It's already spread, but just to clear the record a little bit. But I don't want to interrupt what you were gonna.
it was just to the effect of, once we saw what a rebuilt dam was going to look like in terms of what the sewer district had in mind, with gigantic concrete walls that, if it did maintain the lake, would basically cut off connection to it. That certainly to rewild the stream. I mean, there's probably a metaphor for this community trying to maintain an artificial lake.
Okay. You know what? That's a good
what I
point
mean?
too. The city of Cleveland Heights, we value our history, and that can be a blessing and a curse. Progress and preservation are things that we have to continuously balance. I know there was a time where I thought the most difficult conversation we were going to have about Lower Lake was about the flood wall that they wanted to build on the North Park side of the lake. It was going to be 8 feet tall. We were going to have to find a way to, build the ground up so that it wouldn't be quite, the obstruction, the visual obstruction to the view onto the lake, on the path, and that kind of thing. I thought that was going to be a very difficult conversation. This obviously is a more difficult conversation, and it's not a conversation that I think we can even unilaterally have in Cleveland Heights as a community, because it's not just ours. City of Shaker Heights has to be a partner in this as well. I guess they would be willing to accept our largesse if we decided that we were going to fund all of it, even if they say that they're not willing to. But that's a conversation that the two cities have to have about whether or not we will step in as communities to fund the maintenance of that lake, even if the sewer district says, no, we will not pay for this, and they stick to their guns.
Right.
So, but the sort of the metaphor of the dedication to keeping an artificial lake, yes, and that lake has been around longer than any of us. And so everybody who's experienced it, that's been the condition their whole lives, right?
Over 70 years.
Exactly.
And yet.
And so letting that go can be difficult for anybody. I mean, even somebody who's been here for 10 years and has experienced the lake for 10 years, it's hard to let that go and accept the beauty of the new thing.
Which is actually the old
thing. Right, yes. Again, this goes back to the idea, like we're not going to pay for that in cash.
Right.
Right.
The question is, if it goes back to being a stream,
yeah,
the sewer district pays for it, right?
Yes, in the same way that the Horseshoe Lake. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is similar to the Horseshoe Lake question, and that was the sewer district will pay for certain things, and then if there are other park amenities or trails or seating areas or those sorts of things that don't have a real connection to their core mission, water quality, flood mitigation, those sorts of things, then the cities would have to determine what amenities we are willing to add to that plan. As we've seen with Horseshoe Lake, though, working with the sewer district means that we can reduce our costs, because a lot of the earth moving that needs to be done, the dredging and the sediment, drying it out and reusing it elsewhere, all of that stuff can take place if we're in on the ground floor in planning with that, and we're cooperating and working with the sewer district in that. Once we get to the amenity stage, a lot of that earthwork has been done. We don't have to reinvent that and that kind of thing. So there are pros and cons to that. I don't know what the city of Cleveland Heights will determine. I honestly, though, if I was going to make a prediction, if somebody put a bond on the ballot to save Lower Lake, please don't hold me to this. I do not have a crystal ball, but I can very easily see the people of Cleveland Heights deciding, no, we have other priorities. So, I think that could be an uphill battle. But ultimately, that would likely be up to the people of Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights to determine how much of our skin in the game we want to leave. And like I said, I've got a personal opinion, or at least an emotional response to the idea of losing Lower Lake. But I also, I think, just philosophically, I do want to be open to the good in the other possibility as well. But so before we close out, I know it's relatively late. It's 8:21. I do want to at least talk a little bit about that violence prevention work. A while back in 2023, we were awarded a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant, $300,000, and the grant was intended to fund a program that we would be contracting with Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance to do violence interruption services, primarily focused on youth, 15 to 25, people who are more likely to be the victims or the perpetrators of violent crimes, interrupting violence cycles and retribution for violent acts, showing up to hospitals where somebody has been shot and trying to work with them and their family to stop the cycle of violence, not go back and try to get the person, instead maybe work with police to go through the criminal system on that instead of, taking it into your own hands, that kind of thing. Working with kids to find nonviolent resolution to problems. And we encountered a lot of issues with that grant. Over the last couple of years, the first issue was technical. The grant administrator for that entire time until just recently was the chief of police. And for some reason, the chief was not sort of doing that more granular work to get this actually in hand, get these grant monies in hand. And there was extreme technical difficulty in changing that. There was a real difficult, so many systems in this grant process with the federal government. You have to go through the ID.me process in order to prove that you are who you say you are and that you are affiliated with the organization that has gotten the grant. For a very long time, I could not connect my ID.me to the city of Cleveland Heights. So I couldn't do anything in the grant. I couldn't make changes. I couldn't be, the administrator, the program administrator, anything like that. So that was one issue. A secondary issue was that in our initial grant, there were two grants that we went for that I determined that we were going to go for. One was, and they were from two different federal sources, but they were supposed to feed the same program. We were trying to, multiply our benefit here. That was an issue for the federal government. Now, they didn't tell us that when we applied for the grants, but afterward they said, no, you can't duplicate these things. So, what are you going to do? The third issue was the program that we applied for. They awarded us based on our program design. And then after we were awarded, told us that we needed to modify it in order to actually draw down the funds, because the way that what we had gotten awarded for was not exactly eligible somehow for the grant. So all of these things combined to make it very difficult. Obviously, 2024 was a difficult year for our capacity in the government to fix these things, but we kept working at it. And that $300,000 grant is still active. That's still an active award. I haven't given up on this concept of finding ways to prevent violence instead of just, cleaning up afterward and trying to put people through a criminal system in response to violence, right? So I haven't given up on that, and I've been working with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We've finally gotten some of those technical issues addressed, so I was able to remove Chief Britton as the grant administrator. We've made some changes in who is associated with this grant. Our finance people are now able to be involved in this grant drawdown and do this work and monitor it. And we've also been working to modify the design of the program in order to conform to the requirements that they gave us after we were awarded. Right. So we're working through that. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is that program design modification. What it requires is a little bit more, and this might be difficult in certain respects because, again, people all over get stuck in the ways that they do things. And even when you are interested in changing in one way, you might have a little bit more reluctance in another way, or maybe too much change all at once is difficult. So I know that this will require some effort and some change management. And I hope that the people who want this to happen will keep the pressure on the administration and the council to keep this moving forward. But well, that's a question. What I'm trying to do, I don't know exactly how much time I have, right? I can't know that. It will be easier if I have more to get certain things in place where this can really launch, and not be interrupted, and things can be in place so that this moves forward. But part of the program design changes will include more direct involvement by some specifically selected, well-placed police officers in this conversation. And this will need to be police officers who have a connection to our community, police officers who have a positive relationship with the population of people we're talking about, right? A skill at communicating and a track record of communicating. And there are some specific officers that I've identified that have that track record, that are very well placed and experienced to do this work in collaboration with, any consultants or outside, agencies that we might work with, whether it's, the former executive director of Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance is now doing violence prevention for the county. And so, making sure that we are hopefully connected with the county in this program and still connected with Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance because they've got the model here for that work. But increasing the direct participation among police in a way that still has that community connection is the way that we then get this over the finish line, draw those funds down. People are concerned about us losing the money unless the next administration chooses to abandon this. We're not going to lose the money. So, that's the key. What we can do, even though the grant is scheduled to expend at a certain time, I've been given very much assurance by the Bureau of Justice Assistance that it is a relatively simple thing to extend the grant period. They will not have a problem with that, according to what I've been told. And it's a relatively simple change because they want to see this work happen. More than that, it's through some connections that I've built over the course of this term with the African American Mayors Association. What I'm hoping to include in this is sort of a learning process, because there are some jurisdictions in this country who have made amazing progress in improving clearance rates for violent crimes, in preventing violent cycles. We're talking about Baltimore is a major example of a reduction in violent crimes that is born out of a holistic approach, not just enforcement, but prevention and looking at people as people in this process, abandoning like the indiscriminate stop and frisk work and really making connection with community and that kind of thing. So Baltimore is a great example. Chicago is doing great work. Birmingham is doing great work. And making sure that we are connecting with those jurisdictions. And I've got, I've been building some connections with those jurisdictions through these organizations, connecting us, getting best practices, bringing things that, we're starting, but they're doing. And so bringing back those lessons to Cleveland Heights. I know our circumstances are different. We're a suburb. So we're not Baltimore, right? We're not even Cleveland. But there are lessons that we can learn from their fantastic success in this work that improves the relationship between police and community and also reduces violent crime in a sustainable way. And so that's going to be written into this redesign as well, having that capacity to go learn from them and bring those lessons back home. Now, I won't be involved in that piece of it. No matter what, I'm not going to be involved in that piece of it. But this city should continue that work. And I'm dedicated to setting the stage and providing the ability for the next administration to hit the ground running on that and bring that home.
My grandfather would say, from your mouth to God's ears.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, all we can do is put it out and see what comes back. So I know it's late, but I wanted to make sure everybody got one last chance. If you had a question, burning issue, if there is something that is on the mind of the populace because it is, out there in the zeitgeist, and please bring it on. Oh, okay. So if given the opportunity, what would I be focused on through the end of the term? What's the achievement here? So I'm gonna break this up into categories. On development, there are things that are currently in the works. Development deals for infill housing, where I think that the goals that we have set are actually achievable with the partners that we are working with. We've already done some good work around rehab. Now it's time to start rebuilding. And so we've got some things that are coming forward pretty soon about building on those vacant lots, starting with a couple good partners that are willing to take on really a huge chunk of properties and start the process of redeveloping our neighborhoods with homes that will be lived in by families. So working with Rebuild Cleveland and Future Heights as a partner in that for a certain select number of parcels, working with YRM that has done really great work in Shaker Heights, South Euclid, some other jurisdictions already. We're going to knock out a whole bunch of infill housing rebuild. That's something that I will be working on to try to see through to the completion of that deal and the start of that construction and that design work. So that's a major thing, that infill housing development. Additionally, to the degree that the city can contribute to continuing phases of the Taylor Road revitalization, building on the Taylor Tudor work, building on the work that we anticipate at the Taylor Road Synagogue, building on the changes that we're seeing on the Taylor side of Kane Park. All of those things holistically coming together. We've got this TLCI study implementation along Taylor Road and the Taylor Road corridor to increase multimodal transportation along Taylor and safety along Taylor. We've had a lot of work there. That's including some stuff that people don't know as much about, like recently met with California Skate Parks over at Kane Park to have a conversation about rebuilding that skate park over there because it's, not the greatest. We learned a lot of lessons from Lakewood. California Skate Parks did Lakewood's rebuild, and working with them, I think is going to be a benefit to that corridor, to tying in and providing more activity for youth, more free play for youth in a way that is expanding in urban suburban areas like ours, right? Skateboarding, doing that kind of play and sport is something that's growing here, and we want to make more space for that. And that was another grant I went for. And we got a bunch of money again from the federal government to pursue that and some tennis court improvements as well. But taking that money and putting it toward that and getting that started is important. I think that we could probably get some of that done by the end of the year. If we moved on it, I think we'll see what happens if it's interrupted. I can't speak to that. The other work that I'd like to see completed and shepherded through is the work that we've started over at Denison. That the park space over there, we're finally to the point where we're really installing that splash pad. Going to be pouring concrete. We've got the utilities, set, and we're making progress there finally. So there's that. Those park things. More development. There's some work over at the corner of Fairmount and Lee. Fairmount and Lee. Over by the park and over by Beaumont, where we've got Carmelite Monastery, right? And I'm hoping to get the ball rolling, and I've been working with the owner of that property to try to see what we can do, how the administration can be helpful in moving that project forward in a way that benefits the developer and the community. There are some hurdles, and they're the hurdles that we talked about earlier around development, around zoning, around change. In order to make that project financially feasible and also, frankly, societally stable and sustainable, we've got to make some changes. We've got to make some allowances for alternate uses that aren't allowed right now in the zoning code, right? It just doesn't work if all they can do is build a couple houses on that land. That's not something that can happen. So we need to make some changes if we want to see something wonderful happen. And I've seen some plans for that space that, in my view, are inspiring in a way, not in the lofty way, but inspiring in the sense of, yes, this is something that we can do in this city. We can build a development that, matches higher density with lower density, matches senior living with, creating this multi-generational space that allows for amenities for children and for seniors and aging in place in a way that attracts and retains more than just, a couple families in the single family homes that we would currently allow to be built on that land. So that's something that I want to see launch, that development. Obviously, the negotiation between the cities of Shaker Heights. I've been working on this with the city of Shaker Heights and the sewer district for a very long time when it comes to Horseshoe Lake Park and the revitalization of Dome Brook at Horseshoe Lake Park, and now this discussion about Lower Lake. I'd like to take the institutional knowledge that I have gained through the continuing discussion and apply it to this continuing discussion about Lower Lake and help with that. Really, really importantly, though, as well, is making sure and working with finance, we're getting really, really close to the end of that 2023 audit process. That should be done relatively soon. We are in tandem with that. We're on parallel track with the 2024 audit, and that should be complete by the end of the year as well. That's our estimate for that, having that done. And providing that level of certainty about the strength of our finances to the people of Cleveland Heights is something that I'm interested in. And that dovetails really well with the 2026 budget.
I have a really quick question. Do you have to be part of that process? Like because you were in office, do you have to be part of that audit process?
Well, this is the thing. So, I when I was informed, and this goes back to, some advice that I would give any mayor and the staff of mayors, you have to be able and willing to provide bad news to your boss. You can't hide these things. And so ultimately, it took a long time for me to be informed, a much longer time than it should have taken, for me to be informed that the people who were supposed to be working on the audit were not doing what they should have been doing for whatever their reasons. Once I learned of that, I started working immediately. So I'm working with the accounting firm to start tracking down information that we need, getting information from workers' compensation and transmitting it to the accounting firm. OPERS, getting information from them so I'm doing that personally until I can delegate, because at that point we were sort of in flux. And so it was me, Willie Feltz, and then ultimately Rodney Harrison came on, and we've been bird dogging this since then. But I was able to delegate to people who were actually willing and able to do that work. And we brought on Rashawn Caldwell as an assistant director in finance, who has been doing excellent work continuing that process, continuing to support them, answer questions, provide additional executive support when they need it is helpful. But ultimately, when it comes to how that relates to our budgeting process this year, that's going to be the big one. I know that there's a lot of talk about the budget process we went through last year. And I want to assure people and reassure people, 2024 and that process was an anomaly. And it was born out of a bunch of capacity issues that, are not repeated this year, frankly. But we're in a position right now where I do think that it would be more difficult to proceed with a smooth budget process in the case of an interruption in the leadership of the executive branch. And that's something that I, as mayor, would be involved in and supportive of and probably necessary to. That's not me tooting my own horn here. That's information that I'm receiving from the people that I'd be working with on the budget. So that's an important thing that's one of the major important things that we need to do right this year. And when I say do it right, I mean do it in a way that provides the council with a lot of information in a digestible form and early and broken up in a way where you can take in this piece, like maybe the revenue side of things first and the assumptions that we're making around estimates for revenue for 2026 before providing our estimates for expenditures, for operating expenditures, and then separating that from our capital expenditures and providing more information about each capital expenditure, whether it's equipment or a project. Working through that is going to be extremely important. It's further complicated by the fact that we will have a mayor-elect in November. And as I've said, I think part of the transition there is bringing that mayor-elect into the conversation ahead of time, ahead of their swearing in, and providing for their participation in the conversation, most specifically about the shape and funding of the mayor's office so that they can hit the ground running, don't have to make too many changes specifically in that arena, in that budget, but also sort of taking their vision into account when we're talking about funding the rest of the government and giving them information. So the director's talking with, that mayor-elect and illustrating what the ongoing programs and projects are that need to be funded in order to avoid interruption, and making sure that they are on track to continue the progress that we're making. So that transition and the budget conversation are sort of hand in hand. That's going to be a really big thing. And that's one of the major things that I hope to be able to accomplish if I'm allowed to serve out the full term. But the big piece of this, I think, is these ongoing development initiatives that we are continuing to work through. Even those things that are prep work, like I recently signed a contract to allow for a market study for the Noble Road business, corridor. And very specifically, I want to focus on Noble Nela, because I know that is a particular area that needs a lot of support, and finding more specific market information will allow us to know how to maximize that public support. Because what you don't want to do is maximize public support in an area where you're not going to see a return sustainably. You don't want to try to sell sand in the desert, right? So this is one of those things where this is prep work and you don't see the results immediately, but making sure that we are, pursuing that market study and communicating those results ongoing and continuing our work to build up those areas of our city and those business districts in our city that have been neglected primarily by the private market. I think that's an important piece of these last months of the term as well. So that's what I hope to work through that. And of course, that violence interruption program, and making sure that gets launched so that we can continue that program, draw down those funds, set ourselves up to expand the grant period and move from there. There is a lot of ongoing work right now. A smooth transition is one of my major priorities, though, and making sure that whoever is elected to lead the administration, no matter what the charter environment ends up being at the beginning of next year, I want that person to be in the best possible position to do good things for Cleveland Heights. So that's when it comes to the absolute priority. Like, there are certain specific things that I want to do, but that's the big one. So,
I live in a high school, and that block between Good North and Lee Road is in terrible shape. Every 2-3 months they're coming there patching. It's right by the high school, that block by the high school. They're patching it, and a lot of dips and dumps in that street, and that needs to be resurfaced very bad.
So,
I'm also concerned about Cedar Lee. There's becoming a parking problem there. Those 2 new apartment buildings, I think they're supposed to use the parkade for parking, and it's creating a problem. It's hard to find parking up there now.
okay, so you know what? And you just brought up something else. Let me see. I don't know if this. I was on a live stream while we were doing this. I think it stopped at some point. But one of the things that you're talking about, we did resurface Goodnor, for instance. Yeah, and Marlindale, and that was important. And those were additions to the road program this year. They weren't initially on the list, but what we found is that a lot of the construction traffic and diversion, when we had, it caused some additional problems, and we wanted to make sure that we addressed those, and that's why we added those to the road program. Going back to the budget conversation, our budget needs to, on a continuing basis, include more and more proactive road resurfacing money, right? And that requires planning for additional expense on road resurfacing. So we have fewer potholes to fill because we have more roads that we've resurfaced in any given year. I think we're going to have more and more potholes because of the way that the climate is changing. Our weather patterns are changing. So we're going to have more and more potholes in all likelihood because of freeze-thaw cycles in the winter. And that's going to cause more problems unless we decide to proactively address them. So when it comes to the condition of the roads, I've said this before, one of the things that I want to pursue in this budget is a capital expenditure for new capital equipment that we would affix to our refuse and recycling trucks to, on a continuing basis, use LiDAR to scan our roads and the condition of our roads in a very subjective way so that we can see cracks that are occurring in the roads, so that we can prioritize preventative maintenance before it gets to a pothole. We we've got our crack sealing program and our road program, but maybe, completely separate from the road program, if we start to see cracks developing in this road over here, well, let's do some crack sealing over here then. That can, inform us in a real-time way, stop having to rely on people, hitting the pothole and reporting it for us to know about it. And that will allow more, convenience for the people driving down smooth streets. And it will also save money in the long run. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I appreciate that. And then the last thing you talked about was the parking over in Cedar Lee. It was devastating earlier this year when the Cedar Lee Meadowbrook project, the Marquee project, caught fire. We got the news that this was happening. I'll never forget. Me and my wife are out there spreading salt because it's freezing. We've got firefighters from all over the place throwing water at this fire, and they are slipping on ice. So we're out there with bags of salt, spreading salt at firefighters' feet, watching this thing burn. And the way that it's happening, ultimately, what they're doing is valiant, and it is important, and it is impressive. But all they can do, given those circumstances, is control the fire. And they did an amazing job, because that fire could have easily spread and devastated much more than it did, including the high school. There were embers floating over to the high school, and there was a really smart guy over at the high school who was out there on the roof of the high school making sure that those embers didn't burn that high school down too. He was a school employee over there. And so we were hoping that this would be done, right? That by the end of the, we'd be done with this. Like right now, the piece is 85% leased out. That's great. But we're rebuilding. One thing I knew when that building was burning is that we were not going to waste time. We were going to demolish this thing as quickly as possible and rebuild as quickly as possible, because we knew we needed that done. And that's what we did. But you're right. The construction, the blocking of the road, the difficulty that comes from that, the additional residents in the business district, and the additional activity in the business district can lead to those parking problems. Now, there are parking problems, except every time I go over there and I see people having parking problems, you know what else I see? I see a parking lot on Cedar, that's a block away from Cedar Lee intersection, that is never full. I see the parking structure that is never full. People haven't acclimated to using those avenues yet. The on-street parking is usually pretty full. In certain times of the day, it's more difficult. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the parking behind, like where Stone Oven and Phoenix are. Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to take a closer look at that time, between 12 and 5 as well, just to see where some of the bottlenecks might be relieved on parking over there. But I do think that we need to acclimate more people to using the parking structure as well. One of the ways that we do that, and this has been a nightmare my entire term, is making sure that that damn elevator is functional consistently. It took a very long time to force the elevator companies to fix the damn thing. And then I just went over there to check on it because I do that periodically, and it wasn't functional again. So I immediately called. They're trying to get it fixed. I'm hoping that it's been fixed. I need to go back and check. But making sure that the parking is as convenient as it can be, and that includes having a functioning elevator on a consistent basis, and enforcing that with the companies that are expected to provide that service, will make it easier for people generally.
Streets, and that meant they were parking there all day long. They had to have repairs around the house. It had something done. There was no place to park. Plus, they parked in Cave Park all the summer on the street. So I solved that problem. We worked out a deal where they got suggested they work out a deal where they could park at the parking garage.
Well,
so now, see, that's one of my main concerns. But I don't want those kids parking on my street there because it creates a problem for me.
I hear you. Okay. Well, I know one of the things that the school asked for was use of that parking lot over that block away from the Cedar Lee intersection, next to that AT&T building. And it's actually a parking lot that the city has a long-term lease with AT&T for. We don't own that property, but we've made it available to the school for their use as well, especially during their special events. But that's when they were parking on your street. Okay. Well, we knew that when we got rid of the surface parking, people were parking for free in that surface parking lot, because we had stopped charging metered parking, during COVID. Now, one of the things that I think you'll find is that ultimately, I expected to, roll this out in a gradual way around parking, especially on-street parking, and finding a parking solution that isn't, putting a quarter into a meter, but something where it promotes churn, especially with the on-street parking in the business district. Not necessarily in the parking lots yet. We don't want to cause undue strain on the patrons, as we're still trying to, make sure that the businesses are in good shape. We're not running people away with tickets and that kind of thing, but especially starting with the on-street parking in the business districts, making that paid parking again. Time-limited parking will allow for more churn and hopefully more access to immediate parking for those people who need to park, go in, have a sandwich, and then leave, or something like that. So that's something that I was expecting to roll out over the next, year or so. I imagine that the next administration and council will be working toward that as well, which should help to alleviate some of those issues, and you won't have people parking on street all day, freeing up spaces for people who are there and then leaving because they're just patronizing a business. But I hear your concern about sort of transferring parking onto neighboring streets. And so I imagine we'll be looking at that too, especially as next year when that additional phase of the Cedar Lee Meadowbrook, the Marquee project, comes online. Because we're expecting that late next year. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. It's late. I appreciate y'all staying with me so long. And with that, let's cut it. All right. Thanks, everybody.